It's so good to be here with you.
All right, so we've once again seen the deadly confluence of hatred and gun violence in America. Again, been a little bit more than a year since the president signed that gun control legislation. I guess the question now is this the best Congress can do? You know, should the American people just not hold their breath when it comes to seeing more gun control legislation? It
certainly isn't the best that Congress can do. We need to do so much more. And let's be clear, these grim statistics, 480 mass shootings, that's almost 2 a day in the last 8 months. This is a policy choice. We have chosen guns over our kids, guns over our safer communities, and we have to do better. But with the extremists in control of the House, they are choosing to wear assault weapon lapel pins to show where their allegiance is, while we're fighting to make sure that kids go to school and come home safely. And so just this week, President Biden, because he doesn't want to wait for the House GOP to pass more gun safety legislation, close some of the loopholes that prevent background checks. And he is doing everything in his power as president to use his executive authority because the GOP refuses to act. And this is going to be a critical issue as we go into 24.
Do you recall seeing any noticeable difference? Because I just go back to what we saw at Sandy Hook. Nothing changed. We had a series of gun violence incidents across the country at schools. Then you had Uvalde, and then something changed.
Yeah.
What was the difference? Do you recall being in those moments and saying, okay, now the Republicans are willing to play ball with us?
I'll tell you what the difference was a Democratic president in Joe Biden, a Democrat-controlled House, and a Democrat-controlled Senate. That is the difference. This issue shouldn't be bipartisan. Gun violence is in red states, blue states. People don't ask who you voted for before you're mowed down in a movie theater, in a place of worship, in a school. So what the difference is that we have to elect people who are going to prioritize safety in our communities.
Let's switch to the wildfires in Maui. You just visited Maui. Can you tell us about what you saw and how concerned you are that folks there as well in Florida may not get the billions of dollars that they need for rebuilding due to this potential government shutdown we're going to talk about more?
Yeah, thank you, Sue, for the question. It is hard to describe the devastation. Just imagine your own community completely burned to ash in just a few hours. It was really just a confluence of high winds, of drought, of grass that acted as kindling, just has overtaken this community. And it is one of the more historically significant communities, as well as a place of restaurants and small businesses and tremendous pride. And so it was very difficult to walk those streets and see cars where the windshield had melted, which happens at 2,000 degrees. And just think about what it was like. Some of those fires were traveling as fast as a mile a minute when they overcame. So what we need to do as Congress is make sure that FEMA, and we had a chance to tour the FEMA facility, has the funding they need. They are running out of money. They will be out of money by the end of September, the end of the federal fiscal year. And President Biden has put forward a significant, a $16 billion request so that we can meet the needs, not only of the people of Maui, but of the people of Vermont, the recent hurricane victims we're seeing in Florida, the flooding around this country, tornadoes, the more severe weather we're seeing, FEMA's role, unfortunately, is going to become more and more needed.
So I hit the streets. I went out and asked folks about the likelihood of a government shutdown, and they seem resigned to it. Let's take a listen and get your reaction afterwards.
I mean, I hate to say this, but I feel a little complacent about it because it happens so often. But, you know, what are you going to do?
No, they always take a pass on it. They just like to have everybody hold their breath, and then finally someone caves on some issue, and on we go. Because, I mean, really, there's 3 or 4 fruitcakes in Congress who would like to see it shut down. But that's not really what most politicians want.
So what's your reaction to voters? There are a bunch of them who just said, yeah, whatever, it happens all the time. And do you expect that a shutdown is going to happen?
So here's how I see it. We just had a manufactured default crisis a few months ago. It's no wonder people are cynical about this process. And there was an agreement with President Biden and Speaker McCarthy. And it took just a matter of days for Speaker McCarthy to walk that agreement back and say that it was just a ceiling and they do not have to make the investments they agreed to into our economy, into our recovery, into the American people. And so what we saw by the end of July, we have 12 different budget bills that make up our federal budget. We had passed one under the House GOP leadership, one, and we were sent home for 6 weeks. So when we return on the 12th, we'll have 3 weeks to pass a budget and make sure that we continue to fund, that people get not only the FEMA aid they need, but their Social Security checks, their Medicare checks, the fundamentals that people depend on for government. As we look at the migrant housing crisis here in Massachusetts, we need that funding to flow to states to help them deal with this influx of migrants. So this is such a fundamental responsibility. And I can tell you that House Democrats are going to do everything we can to make sure that we live up to that. This is so critical to who we are and making sure the American people get what they need from their government.
Later on in the show, we're going to hear from Senator Warren about her recent trip to Ukraine. To your point, do you anticipate Republicans saying, fine, we will refill the coffers of FEMA, but we're going to have to do some of that with money that the president wants to send to Ukraine to help them fight Russia?
We're certainly going to see that in the House from a certain segment of extremists. And that is who Speaker McCarthy tends to cater to. That is who he needed. We are very much in a House run by Marjorie Taylor Greene at this point. But I think that overall, we are going to hold firm. We know that we are defending our own democracy when we are helping the people of Ukraine. And I think that that issue is going to win out.
So in a possible government shutdown, you also have COVID relief funding for child care centers that is going to be running out. We know this is an issue and important to you. We have some data. One nonprofit think tank, the Century Foundation, estimates 70,000 child care programs would close if that funding runs out at the end of the month, impacting more than 3 million kids under the age of 5 and their families. Any prospects for keeping that funding alive?
Yes, I'm going to be filing a bill with Senate partners, Bernie Sanders and many others, that is going to make sure that this funding continues to flow. We know child care is economic infrastructure, and we know that the pandemic just pulled back the curtain on how fragile a system this is. And here in Massachusetts, we pay some of the highest child care tuition in the country. We're only second to Washington, D.C. in the rates that families are asked to pay. And we know this is critical, not only to having our children well cared for, ready to learn by the time they hit kindergarten, but keeping parents working and making sure they can access and afford high-quality child care. And so this funding cliff is just another example of we need to be making these investments in the American family. These are solutions that Democrats are coming up with to help reduce costs, much like the IRA bill that we just we're celebrating 1-year anniversary, where we were able to bring the health care costs down. $35 a month cap on insulin has been a game changer. And the announcement this week about the first 10 drugs that Medicare will be able to negotiate, those 10 drugs will impact 200,000 seniors here in Massachusetts who currently have prescriptions for those drugs, dramatically reducing their costs, some estimates up to $7,000 a year.
All right, talk politics. real politics, not policy politics, the other kind of politics. Republicans are doubling down on this culture war stuff. Anti-abortion efforts continue. How is this going to help them? What do they think this is going to do to help them in the upcoming elections, knowing what we know about public opinion and seeing what we saw in the midterm elections?
I have no idea. I have no idea. What we have seen is a replacement of working for people, coming together. We expect to have policy differences, but this has become a GOP that is just about supporting Donald Trump. No matter how outrageous, illegal his behavior is, that is where they are. And they continue to try and talk a more moderate game at home in their districts. They come to Washington, they fall in line, and they vote with Donald Trump. And he is ever present in their decisions. So you're absolutely right. They are continuing their march towards a national abortion ban. Here in Massachusetts, we are not safe from that decision to make this a national ban. And we're seeing them work these cases through the courts. We're seeing them file legislation to do just that. They are not done with rolling back Social Security and Medicare. They put this in the budget. This is active discussions that they are having. They want to repeal everything that we did in the Inflation Reduction Act to address climate change, so we can start to build resiliency in communities in Hawaii, in places like Vermont, where we saw such extreme flooding, for the hurricanes, where we're seeing water temperatures over 100 degrees. I mean, we have a crisis here, and we're watching them say, let's roll back affordable housing construction by 70%. Let's cut food programs for those who are hungry in our own communities here in Massachusetts. The priorities have become totally twisted, and the GOP is now just about supporting Donald Trump. And who pays the price for that? The American people.
So you laid out a lot of things that they want to do, are doing, but you turn on the news these days and it seems the only thing they are doing is trying to tie Hunter Biden's behavior to his father. On Friday, NBC News reported that the White House is standing up a war room, attorneys, comms folks. They appear that they're going to do this. Do you think the Speaker has the votes to bring an impeachment inquiry? And do you see that as the big battle before we get really deep into election year?
Well, I think you framed this exactly right. That is all they're doing. And what we have here is Hunter Biden, a private citizen with a DOJ investigation ongoing. That should be the full stop. But it isn't, because they don't want to look at how successful Bidenomics has been. They don't want to address these issues. They are about culture wars and seating division. So I can tell you, just in the last week, I've been in my district, in Ohio, in Illinois, in Hawaii, and not a single person talked to me about Hunter Biden. What they did talk to me about was the excitement over the manufacturing that's returning to our country. What they did talk to me about was concern about housing costs. What they did talk to me about was concern about flooding, both in Chicago and the wildfires in Maui. This is what's on the minds of the American people, and Hunter Biden is a GOP smokescreen because they don't want to talk about the real solutions that people need.